Hi, everybody. I'm India, and I am going to be reading you this week's story. It's all about Daniel and the lion. So I'm sporting my lion hair just for today's story. All right. Daniel was born the son of a nobleman in Jerusalem. He had a comfortable life with his family, and he enjoyed his schoolwork and running races with his friends. Daniel was smart and strong and well loved by his friends and his family. He and his family were Jewish. They believed in one creator of the universe, and they believed in making daily offerings and prayers. When it was warm, his family would go out on the flat roof of their home and say their prayers together. It was easy to feel safe and secure during those times. But life changed for Daniel when he was a young man. An invading army from the Babylonian Empire came into his city and took many young men captive. Daniel was taken away with many others to serve the king of the mighty city of Babylon. He would never return to his home. This was a difficult and painful time for Daniel. His family was not there to comfort him. He was no longer the person he had been. His clothes were different, the food he ate and the bed he slept in were different. He had to learn a new language, and they even changed his name to Belteshazzar. But when Daniel prayed and looked within to find comfort, he found that he was the same inside. He still felt God's loving presence, and he knew his true self would always be the same. Daniel was trained in the ways of the court, and the king was very impressed with Daniel's intelligence and calm strength. Daniel seemed to be able to do everything well. One day, there was a lot of trouble in the court because the king had a strange dream that made no sense. The king was so angry and frustrated that none of his wise counselors could help, and he threatened to kill them all. Then someone thought to ask Daniel. After considering the problem and praying about it, Daniel was able to explain the dream to the king. After that, Daniel was given more important jobs and eventually was in charge of most of the city. This really upset the old councilman. Daniel was a young outsider, and now he was the king's favorite. But what could be done? If they tried to get rid of him or kill him, the king would never forgive them. Then one of the counselors had an idea. What if the king were forced to get rid of Daniel because it was the law? In Babylon, people prayed to a variety of gods and even treated the king like a god sometimes. The king knew that Daniel came from a place where they prayed to one God, and he knew Daniel prayed 3 times a day without fail. But that was all right with the king because Daniel had helped him many times. The scheming governors and counselors wrote a new law and brought it before the king. The law said it was wrong for people of Babylon to pray or to ask favors from anyone but the true king of Babylon. Anyone who violated the law would be thrown to the hungry lions that were kept in a cave under the palace. The king signed it, never even thinking about Daniel. Daniel heard about the new law and he thought about obeying the king, but he knew in his heart that to stop his daily prayers would be wrong. As he knelt on the floor of his home, just as he had done as a young child, the king's men came in and gleefully caught him defying the law. The king was distraught when Daniel was brought before him. He cried out with fury, "I have been tricked." But if the king did not follow through with the punishment, his people would think him weak and foolish. He had to do it. He had to put Daniel in the lion's den. He looked Daniel in the eye and said, "Your God will save you. Daniel, do not fear." When Daniel stood at the edge of the pit, he could smell the lions below him and hear their angry growls. He knew his body might be torn to pieces and he would die, but in his soul he felt peace and still. He knew his true self would never die and would always be the same. The love and light he experienced had nothing to do with conditions of the world, and he smiled kindly at the king's reassurance. Daniel fell to the ground and the lions all faced him with hungry eyes. But a bright light filled the den and Daniel felt no fear. Was that an angel in the light? The lions relaxed and regarded Daniel with eyes of peace and calmness. Daniel felt secure and he looked at the lions with compassion. They were captives here as well. The king spent a long and sleepless night wondering what was happening to Daniel, and he rose at dawn to go to the lion's den. When the king opened the sealed den, he was overjoyed to find Daniel safe. He immediately made a new decree honoring the God that Daniel worshiped. Daniel remained in the king's service for the rest of his years. So that was Daniel and the lion. So now that you've heard the story, do you think Daniel was foolish to defy the king's order and pray the way he always had? What do you think Daniel did in the lion's den all night? Do you think he was scared? Do you think he talked to the lions? Do you think he petted them? And why do you think that Daniel was not afraid to die? Thanks so much for listening to my story. See you next time.